Simplify the following expression. The square root of 3 times the quantity 5 square roots of 3 minus the square root of 12 plus the square root of 10. Since there is no operator between the square root of 3 and the parentheses, like there's no addition sign or subtraction sign or division sign, it's understood to be multiplication. So I'm multiplying the square root of 3 times all of these terms inside my parentheses, which means we're going to use the distributive property. So I'll start by multiplying the square root of 3 times 5 square roots of 3. So that's 5 times, and then the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9, which is 3. So that's 5 times 3. The square root of 3 times the negative square root of 12 is the negative square root of, and you just multiply your numbers under the square root. So 3 times 12 is 36. And then the square root of 3 times the square root of 10. So again, we're just multiplying our numbers under the radical. 3 times 10 is 30, so the square root of 30. But we're not finished yet because we have some simplifying that we can do. 5 times 3 is 15 minus the square root of 36 is 6 because 6 times 6 is 36 plus, now 30. You want to break down that number and see if there is any part of it that we can take the square root of. So to break it down, you can just do a factor tree. 30 is 3 times 10, 3 is prime, and 10 is 2 times 5, and those are both prime. So I have no pairs of numbers and no perfect square factors, so I can't take the square root of any part of 30. So it has to be left as just the square root of 30. And finally, we can subtract 15 minus 6, since those are like terms, and we get 9. So 9 plus the square root of 30. So our answer is A. Simplify the following expression. The quantity 2x squared plus 3 times the quantity 2x minus 1. To simplify, we need to FOIL. The F in FOIL stands for first. So we're going to take the first term in our first binomial and multiply it times the first term in our second binomial. First and first. 2x squared times 2x. 2 times 2 is 4. X squared times x is x cubed. Next we do O, which stands for outer. So those are the two terms on the outside, which would be 2x squared and negative 1. So 2x squared times a negative 1 is negative 2x squared. Then our inner terms are the two terms on the inside, 3 times 2x, which is a positive 6x. And then finally, our last terms. So the last term in the first set of parentheses and the last term in the second set of parentheses. 3 times negative 1, which is negative 3. Then we'd want to look and see if we had any like terms to combine, and we don't. We have a cubic x term, a squared x term, an x term, and then just a constant. So that's our answer, which matches answer choice A. In a coordinate plane, what is the distance between point A, 4, 9, and B, 15, 18? Well, there's a very straightforward way to answer this question. If we want to find the distance between 2 points in a coordinate plane, then we need to use the distance formula. The distance formula is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And the x2, y2, x1, y1, those are just the coordinates of your ordered pairs. For instance, this is my first ordered pair. So this will be my x1, y1. This is my second ordered pair. So this is my x2, y2. Now all we need to do is substitute. So distance equals the square root of x2 is 15 minus x1 is 4 squared plus y2 is 18 minus y1 is 9 squared. And now we need to follow our order of operations, which means grouping symbols first. So distance equals the square root of 15 minus 4 is 11 squared plus 18 minus 9 is 9 squared. Next, our order of operations tells us to take care of our exponents. So the distance equals the square root of 11 squared is 11 times 11, which is 121, plus 9 squared is 9 times 9, or 81. Then we need to add. So the distance equals the square root of 121 plus 81, which is 202. And 202 is not a perfect square, so if I take the square root of it, I'm going to get an irrational number, a decimal that just keeps on going. So our answer is simply the square root of 202. If x divided by 3 plus 7 equals 35, what is the value of x? I'm going to start by writing this problem. X divided by 3 plus 7 equals 35. The first thing we want to do is subtract 7 from both sides, because a positive 7 and a negative 7 are additive inverses of each other and they cancel. So on the left side, we're left with x divided by 3. And on the right side, 35 minus 7 is 28. The opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. So now we need to multiply both sides by 3. If you put this 3 over 1, now you're multiplying two fractions together, and the numerator and this denominator cross-cancel. And you're simply left with x divided by 1, which is just x. So now if we determine what 28 times 3 is, we'll have our answer. 3 times 8 is 24, so write the 4 and carry the 2. And 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8. So that means that x is 84, which is answer C. Three x squared y plus y divided by 2 minus 6x. If x equals 4 and y equals 10, what is the value of the expression? First, I'm going to take our expression and copy it. Next, we need to substitute these numbers we were given for their variables. So we're going to replace our x's with 4's. So we have 3, this is 3 times x squared. So it's 3 times 4 squared times y, which is 10, plus y divided by 2, or 10 divided by 2, minus 6 times x, and we're replacing x with 4. To simplify this expression, we need to follow the order of operations, which some people know as PEMDAS. And in PEMDAS, we do parentheses first, which we don't have here, and then exponents next. We do have exponents, so that means the first thing we'll do to simplify is find what 4 squared is. So we bring down the 3 times 4 squared is 16 times 10 plus 10 divided by 2 minus 6 times 4. So that's all of our exponents. Next in PEMDAS is to do multiplication and division from left to right. So starting on the left-hand side, we'll start with multiplying 3 times 16. And we can work that off to the side. 16 times 3, 3 times 6 is 18, so write the 8, carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. So 16 times 3 is 48. So we have 48 times 10 plus 10 divided by 2 minus 6 times 4. We need to continue working our multiplication and division from left to right. So we'll next multiply 48 times 10, which is 480 plus 10 divided by 2 minus 6 times 4. We'll move past the 480 plus, and we'll move right on to division. 480 plus 10 divided by 2 is 5, minus 6 times 4. We have one more multiplication operation to take care of, 6 times 4. So we have 480 plus 5 minus 6 times 4, which is 24. Now we need to go back and consult PEMDAS. We're finished with all our multiplication and division. So we're going to do now our addition and subtraction from left to right. So that means we start with adding 480 plus 5, which gives us 485 minus 24. And 485 minus 24, can work that off to the side. 5 minus 4 is 1, 8 minus 2 is 6, and we bring down the 4, so we get 461, which is answer choice B. Simplify the following expression. 16m to the 16th, y to the 4th, z to the 6th, divided by 8m to the 8th, y squared, z cubed, all raised to the 4th power. First, we want to simplify before we raise to the 4th power. So we're going to start with dividing 16 by 8, which is 2. Then m to the 16th divided by m to the 8th is m to the 16 minus 8. Since when you divide like bases, you subtract the exponents. Y to the 4th divided by y squared is y to the 4 minus 2. And z to the 6th divided by z cubed is z to the 6 minus 3. Now we need to simplify our exponents. So we have 2m to the 16 minus 8, 8, y to the 4 minus 2, 2, and z to the 6 minus 3, 3. We have to be very careful to not forget that all of this is supposed to be raised to the 4th power. So we're not done yet. Now we need to raise everything inside our parentheses to the 4th power. So we'll start with 2 to the 4th. Then we have m to the 8th raised to the 4th. We're raising a power to a power, so we must multiply our exponents. So m to the 8 times 4 is 32. Y to the 2 times 4 is 8. And z to the 3 times 4 is 12. Finally, we need to simplify 2 to the 4th. 2 to the 4th means to multiply 2 times itself 4 times. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So 2 times itself 4 times is 16. M to the 32nd, y to the 8th, z to the 12th. So our answer is answer choice D. Simplify the following expression. The quantity 2x to the 4th cubed plus 2 times the quantity y to the 5th raised to the 5th power. We have to use our rules of exponents here, and our rules tell us that whatever is inside the parentheses must be raised to the exponent outside that parentheses. So we have 2 cubed times x to the 4th cubed. So when we raise an exponent to an exponent, we multiply those exponents together. Plus 2, and then again we have y to the 5th raised to the 5th. So another exponent raised to an exponent. And when you have an exponent raised to an exponent, those must be multiplied together. So y to the 5 times 5. And now we can simplify this. 2 cubed means 2 times itself 3 times, not 2 times 3. So it's 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So 2 cubed is 8, times x to the 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 times y to the 5 times 5 is the 25th power, which is answer choice D. What is the value of x? In x squared plus 12x plus 36 equals 0. We need to find what number we could substitute for x that would make this equation true. And there's more than one way to do this. One way would be to use the quadratic equation, which is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. And the a, b, and c, those are just the coefficients of your, a is the coefficient of your x squared term, b is the coefficient of your x term, and the c is your constant. But there is another way to solve this that may even be a little bit easier than using the quadratic equation, and that is to factor. So I'm going to factor this trinomial into a binomial times a binomial. I know that x times x is x squared. What I need to find out is what my second numbers are in each set of parentheses. And these two numbers need to have a product of 36 and a sum of 12. And the only two numbers that have a product of 36 and a sum of 12 are 6 and 6. And you can always FOIL what you factored to check and see if it is in fact correct. So you could multiply x times x, and that's x squared. That's your first terms. Outer x times 6, 6x. inner 6 times x, 6x. And last, 6 times 6, 36. Then you combine like terms, x squared plus 12x plus 36. And we can see that we did factor correctly, because whenever I FOILed my binomials back out, I got what I started with. So now what we have is that some number times another number is 0. And the only way you can multiply numbers together and get 0 is if at least one of your numbers is 0. That means that either this number, x plus 6, has to be 0, or this number, x plus 6, has to be 0. And now we just need to solve our equations. To solve for x, we need to subtract 6 from both sides. So we have x equals -6. Or, again, to solve for x, we need to subtract 6 from both sides. So we have x equals -6. That means that x is either -6 or it's -6. And you can substitute that solution back in for x and check to see that it really does work. So that's -6 squared plus 12 times -6 plus 36. And what I want to know is, does that equal 0? -6 squared and -6 times a -6 is 36. Plus 12 times -6 is -72 plus 36. And again, I want to know if that equals 0. 36 and 36 is 72 plus -72. And I need to know if that equals 0. 72 plus a -72 is in fact 0. 0 does equal 0. So we can see that we solved our equation correctly. We found the value of x, -6. A rectangular prism measures 12 centimeters by 3 centimeters by 9 centimeters. What is its volume? The formula for volume for a rectangular prism is volume equals length times width times height. And we were given those dimensions: length, width, and height. And really it doesn't matter which one is the length, which one's the width, and which one's the height, since we're just going to multiply those three numbers together anyway. So the volume is 12 centimeters times 3 centimeters times 9 centimeters. And it's up to you which two you choose to multiply together first. You could start with 12 times 3. 3 times 2 is 6. And 3 times 1 is 3. So 12 centimeters times 3 centimeters is 36 centimeters squared times 9 centimeters. So then you could take 36 times 9. 9 times 6 is 54. 9 times 3 is 27. Plus 5 is 32. So 36 centimeters squared times 9 centimeters is 324 centimeters cubed, which is answer choice C. Simplify the following expression: 16x cubed minus 32x squared plus 8x, all divided by 4x. We need to divide each one of these terms by 4x. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite this as 3 separate fractions. And now we can simplify. 16 divided by 4 is 4. X cubed divided by x is x squared. Because when you divide, you subtract the exponents. 3 minus 1 is 2. Minus 32 divided by 4 is 8. X squared divided by x, 2 minus 1, is x to the first. Plus 8 divided by 4 is 2. And x divided by x, or x to the first divided by x to the first, 1 minus 1 is 0. Or you can just think x, or anything really, divided by itself is 1. So x divided by itself is 1, and 1 times 2 is 2. So our answer is C. Solve for x using the following system of equations. 3y plus 10x equals 23. 18y minus 15x equals 50. There are many different ways to solve a system of equations. One is by graphing. You would graph the two lines and then see where they intersect. The solution is the ordered pair of the intersection of those lines, because the intersection is the only ordered pair that will satisfy both equations and make them both true, since it's the only point they have in common. You can also use substitution. That's where you solve for one variable and then substitute that expression into the other equation. And then there's elimination. And that's the method we're going to use now to solve for x. Since we want to solve for x, we want to eliminate y. And eliminate means to get rid of. To get rid of y, I need to multiply this whole equation by a negative 6. Because negative 6 times 3y is negative 18y. And then when I add my two equations together, 18y and negative 18y will cancel or eliminate. Negative 6 times 10x is negative 60x. And negative 6 times 23 is negative. 6 times 20 is 120. 6 times 3 is 18, so 138. And now I need to add my two equations together. 18y and negative 18y is 0. They cancel. Negative 15x and negative 60x is negative 75x. Equals negative 138 and 50. When I add those together, I'm going to get a negative, and I can subtract off to the side here. That's 8, and 13 minus 5 is 8, so negative 88. Finally, to solve for x, we need to divide both sides by negative 75. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 75 divided by 75 is 1, times x is x. And again, a negative divided by a negative will give me a positive. And we can divide those off to the side. 75 goes into 88 one time. 75 times 1 is 75. We subtract and we get 13. Add a decimal and a 0. Bring it down. 75 goes into 130 one time. 75 times 1 is 75. Subtract, and we get 55. Add a 0 and bring it down. And 75 goes into 550, I believe, 7 times. 7 times 70 is 490. 7 times 5 is 35, so that'd be 525. We subtract and we get 25. Add a 0, bring it down. And we could keep on going, dividing until we find the end. But since this is multiple choice, we can already see which answer choice is correct. And that would be answer B, 1 17/100. Evaluate the following expression if x equals 3. X to the 5th times x squared plus y to the 0 power equals. So first we need to substitute 3 for x. So we have 3 to the 5th times 3 squared plus anything raised to the 0 power, x, y, 10, 15, anything raised to the 0 power is 1. So that's plus 1. 3 to the 5th times 3 squared is really 3 to the 7th power plus 1. And 3 to the 7th power is 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, times 3 times 3. 3 to the 5th times 3 squared plus 1. Okay, so we have a lot of 3's to multiply. 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 plus 1. 9 times 9 is 81 times, and then 9 times 3 is 27 plus 1. Okay, so now we need to multiply 81 times 27. 27 times 81, 1 times 7, 7, 1 times 2, 2, 0 placeholder. 8 times 7 is 56, so write the 6, carry the 5. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 5 is 21. So that's 7, we're adding these together, 8, 1, 2. So 2,187 plus 1, which is 2,188. So that's our answer. Answer D. On a 6-sided die, each side has a number between 1 and 6. What is the probability of throwing a 3 or a 4? This die has 6 sides. That means our total is 6, which is the denominator of our fraction for finding our probability. We want to know what the probability of throwing a 3 or, and that is a key word, 3 or a 4. So if it lands on either one of those, we're good. So that's 2 different numbers that we could land on out of our 6 different numbers. And then of course we can simplify our fraction by dividing the numerator and the denominator both by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3, so it's 1 in 3. Or, written like this, a 1 in 3 chance. (7m plus 43 equals 160. What is the value of m? So first I'm going to rewrite my equation. 7m plus 43 equals 160. We want to know what number multiplied times 7 with 43 added to that would give us 160. And we could guess and check numbers until we found a number that would satisfy this equation. But there's a much easier and more direct way. And that is to undo the operations that are done to our variable m. We're going to start by undoing the addition of 43. So we're going to subtract 43 from both sides. And as long as we do that to both sides, we keep our equation equal and balanced. If you have something that's equal to something else, and you take away the same amount from both of those things, then they'll still be equal to each other. So we bring down the 7m. Positive 43 minus 43 is 0. So those cancel. And we bring down the equals. And then we have to subtract. And I can't take 3 from 0, so I'll borrow from the 6. That's a 5. Then I have 10 minus 3 is 7. 5 minus 4 is 1. And I bring down my 1 because 1 minus 0 is 1. So 117. Now I have to undo this 7 times m. And the opposite of multiplying times 7 is dividing by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1, and 1 times m is m. 117 divided by 7, I'm not sure what that is, so I'm going to divide off to the side. 7 goes into 11 one time. 7 times 1 is 7. When you subtract, you get 4. And then we bring down the 7. 7 goes into 47 6 times. 7 times 6 is 42. We subtract and we get 5. Then we add a decimal and a 0 and bring it down. 7 goes into 50 7 times. 7 times 7 is 49. We subtract and we get 1. We add a 0 and bring it down. 7 goes into 10 one time. 7 times 1 is 7. We subtract and we get 3. And we could keep going. But really, that's all I need to find my answer. The 1 tells the 7 to stay the same if we're rounding to the tenths place. So our answer is 16 and 7/10, which is answer choice B. If 16x plus 4 equals 100, what is the value of x? I'm going to start by writing this problem again. So our goal is to find out what x is. That means our goal is to find out what number would make this equation true. And we could guess a bunch of numbers until we found the right answer, or we could take these 4 answers and plug them in until we found the number that would make this equation true. But we have an algebraic way to do it. And that is to start by subtracting 4 from both sides. Because since these two sides are equal to each other, to keep them equal, we have to do the same thing to both sides. So we have 16x plus 4 minus 4. Those are additive inverses of each other. That means they add to be 0, so we can cancel them out. Bring down the equal sign, and then 100 minus 4 is 96. So now we have 16 times x equals 96. The opposite of multiplying times 16 is dividing by 16. So to get x alone, we need to divide both sides by 16. That way our equation is still equal. 16 divided by 16 is 1, and 1 times x is x. And x equals, now we have to divide 96 by 16. So how many times does 16 go into 96? Well, we could always guess. I would guess 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36. Carry the 3. 6 times 1 is 6 plus 3 is 96. So that means that 96 divided by 16 is 6. 96 divided by 16 then is 6. So x equals 6. Answer choice A. X squared plus x equals 42. What is the value of x? We need to find what numbers or number will make this equation true. And there are a couple of different options we have, really. But I'm going to show you how to solve for x by factoring. If I want to factor, then the first thing I need to do is move this 42 to the other side. So subtract 42 from both sides of the equation. So I have x squared plus x minus 42 equals 42 minus 42 is 0. Now I'm ready to factor this trinomial. So I start with my parentheses for my two binomials. And I know that the first term of each parentheses is going to be an x, because x times x is x squared. And then to find my second terms, I need to find two numbers that multiply to give me negative 42 and add to give me a positive 1, because 1 is the coefficient of x. And the two numbers that would multiply to give me a negative 42 and add to give me a positive 1 are 7 and negative 6. 7 times negative 6 is negative 42, and 7 plus negative 6 is a positive 1. You can always check your factoring by foiling. X times x is x squared. X times negative 6 is negative 6x. Plus 7x is x, and 7 times negative 6 is negative 42. What I have now is that some number, and I don't know what it is because I don't know what x is yet, but some number times another number is 0. And the only way to multiply two numbers together and get 0 is if one of your numbers is 0. Which means either x plus 7 has to be 0, or x minus 6 has to be 0. And then we just solve for x in each equation. So to solve for x on this one, we need to subtract 7 from both sides, bring down the x, plus 7 minus 7 is 0, bring down your equals, 0 minus 7 is negative 7. Or, to solve for x in our second equation, we need to add 6 to both sides. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0, so x equals 0 plus 6 is 6, which means x is negative 7 or it is 6, and that's answer C. The quantity y plus 10 squared minus 625 equals 0. Solve for y. The first thing we want to do is add 625 to both sides, because doing that is going to help us get y alone and thus solve for it. So we bring down our quantity y plus 10 squared. Negative 625 plus 625 is 0, so that just cancels out, and that equals 0 plus 625, which is 625. Well, then we want to get rid of this squared because our y is kind of locked in those parentheses. So to unlock them, we want to do the opposite of squaring, which is square rooting. So we square root both sides. And the square root and the square undo each other. They're the exact opposites of each other. So they cancel each other out, and we're just left with y plus 10 equals, and when I take the square root of 625, I get plus or minus 25. And that's because a positive 25 squared would give me 625, but also a negative 25 squared would give me 625. So we really have two answers there. So we write it with a plus or minus. And finally, to solve for y, we need to subtract 10 from both sides. So we have y plus 10 minus 10 is 0, so equals negative 10 plus or minus 25. We have two answers, and to find them, we just need to simplify. So we have y equals negative 10 plus 25, and y equals negative 10 minus 25. All I did was separate the plus or the minus into two separate expressions. Negative 10 plus 25 is 15, while negative 10 minus 25 is negative 35. So our solutions are that y is 15 or negative 35, which is answer D. What is the value of 6 factorial? What 6 factorial means is 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And so since we're just multiplying a series of numbers, you can multiply them in any order you want. So you can take any two numbers and multiply those together first, and then continue multiplying. But I'll just multiply them in order. So we have 6 times 5, which is 30, times 4, times 3, times 2, times 1. Then we can multiply 30 times 4. We have 30, 60, 90, 120. So 30 times 4 is 120, times 3 times 2 times 1. Then 120 times 3, 120 times 3. 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. So 360 times 2 times 1. 360 times 2. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 6 is 12, carry the 1. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So 720 times 1, and 720 times 1 is just 720. So 6 factorial is equal to 720. Answer C. Simplify the following expression. 2x to the 4th, y to the 7th, m squared, z, times 5x squared, y cubed, m to the 8th. I'm going to start by multiplying my like terms together. So I can rewrite this. It's multiplication, so you can multiply in any order you want. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 5 together. And then I've got this x to the 4th times the x squared. And then we have y to the 7th times y cubed. And then we have m squared times m to the 8th. And then finally we just have this z, so times z. And now we'll simplify each one of these. So 2 times 5 is 10. And so right now you could already eliminate answer choice B because we're multiplying. We're not adding 2 and 5 together. We're multiplying. And then we get to our x's. X to the 4th times x squared. And what that really is, x to the 4th means x times itself 4 times. While x squared means x times itself 2 times. So when we multiply x to the 4th times x squared, we're multiplying x times itself a total of 6 times. So it's x to the 6th. You can see what we end up doing is adding those exponents together. And it's the same thing with y to the 7th times y cubed. Let's look at that one a little differently. So y to the 7th times y cubed. Y to the 7th is y times itself 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times y cubed. So times 1, 2, 3. So what we end up with is y times itself a total of 10 times. So y to the 7th times y cubed is y to the 10th. Or again, we're adding those exponents. Then we have m squared times m to the 8th. So same concept. Again, we're going to add our exponents. We get m to the 10th. And then finally, times z. So that means our answer is D. 10, x to the 6th, y to the 10th, m to the 10th, z. In the following inequality, solve for x. Negative 4x plus 8 is greater than or equal to 48. To solve for x, we need to get x alone, which means undoing the operations that are being done to x currently. And that is negative 4 times x and plus 8. So we'll start by getting rid of the plus 8. And we can get rid of it by doing the exact opposite of adding 8, subtracting 8. And if we subtract 8 from the left side of our inequality symbol, then we must also subtract 8 from the right side to keep it even. So we bring down our negative 4x. A positive 8 minus 8 is 0, is greater than or equal to 48 minus 8 is 40. And we're almost done. Now we need to undo negative 4 times x. And the opposite of multiplying by a negative 4 is dividing by a negative 4. Now with inequalities, there is a special rule you have to remember. And that is, if you divide both sides by a negative number, or you multiply both sides by a negative number, you have to flip the sign. So now instead of greater than or equal to, our sign is now a less than or equal to sign. And again, that's because we divided both sides by a negative number. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 is 1, and 1 times x is x. 40 divided by negative 4, a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and 40 divided by 4 is 10. So x is less than or equal to negative 10. Answer D. If x minus 9 equals 2x plus 10, what is the value of x? To solve for x, the first thing we need to do is get all of our x terms on the same side of the equal sign. And we can do that two different ways. One is we could subtract x from both sides, which would eliminate x from the left side. Or we could subtract 2x from both sides, which would eliminate 2x from the right side. I prefer subtracting x from both sides. X minus x is 0. They cancel because they're additive inverses of each other. So on the left side, we're left with negative 9. We bring down our equal sign. Then we have 2x minus x, which gives us simply x. Sometimes people think that 2x minus x would be 2. But you have to think about what you're really doing. I always like to relate things to money. So if you had $2 and I took away $1 from you, then you would still have $1 left. That dollar wouldn't magically turn into something else. It's still $1. So 2x minus x, we still have an x left, plus 10. To get x by itself, we need to get rid of this plus 10. So the opposite of adding 10 is subtracting 10. So subtract 10 from both sides. Negative 9 and negative 10 is negative 19. Bring down the equal sign, and we have our x. Plus 10 and a negative 10 cancels. They're additive inverses of each other. So we get that x equals negative 19, or A. In the following equation, solve for x by factoring. 2x squared minus 7x equals x squared minus 12. In order to factor, we need to get all of our terms on the same side. So that means subtracting an x squared from both sides so that we have x squared now minus 7x, and then adding 12 to both sides. So now this is plus 12 equals 0. Now we're ready to factor. So I have a binomial and a binomial equals 0. I know my first two terms are going to be, or my first term in each binomial, because x times x gives me x squared. To find these second numbers in each binomial, these numbers must be factors of 12 that add to be negative 7. Let's start by looking at the factors of 12. 1 and 12 are factors of 12. 2 and 6 are factors of 12. And also 3 and 4 are factors of 12. Now again, these numbers have to add to give us a negative 7, while also multiplying to give us a positive 12. The only way these numbers can do both those things is if they're both negative. Because a negative times a negative will give us the positive 12, but when we add the two negatives together, we'll get our negative 7. So negative 1 and negative 12, that's negative 13, not negative 7. Doesn't work. Negative 2 and negative 6 is negative 8, not negative 7. Doesn't work. But negative 3 and negative 4 does give me negative 7. So I found my numbers, negative 3 and negative 4. And then if you just FOIL, you can check your answer to see if it's correct. So we do first times first, x times x, x squared. Outer, x times negative 4 is negative 4x. Then the inner, negative 3 times x, negative 3x. So you have negative 4x plus negative 3x, which is the middle term, negative 7x. And then finally the last, negative 3 times negative 4, which is a positive 12. So now we've checked and we know that we factored correctly. But we still haven't solved for x. Here we have two expressions that we're multiplying together, and that gives us 0. The only way you can multiply two numbers together and get 0 is if one of them is 0. So that means that either x minus 3 must be 0, or x minus 4 must be 0. And now we just solve each equation. So add 3 and 3. Those cancel because they're additive inverses, and x equals 3. Or add 4 and add 4, and those cancel because they're additive inverses, and x equals 4. So that means x equals 3 and 4, which is answer B. Solve for y in the following inequality. Negative 2y is greater than or equal to 24 plus 6. So the first thing we want to do is combine these like terms, 24 plus 6. So we have negative 2y is greater than or equal to, And 24 plus 6 is 30. To solve for y, we need to divide by a -2. Since we have -2 times y, to undo that and get y alone, we divide both sides by -2. -2 divided by -2 is 1, and 1 times y leaves us with just y. Now, since we divided both sides by a negative, we have to flip our inequality sign. It was greater than or equal to, so now it's less than or equal to. And 30 divided by a -2, a positive number divided by a negative number is a negative number. And 30 divided by 2 is 15. That means that y is less than or equal to -15, which is answer choice C. A line passes through points A, -318, and B, 5,2. What is the slope of the line? Well, there are a couple of different ways we can find slope. One would be to graph these 2 points on a coordinate plane and then count between the points the rise and the run. Because that's all that slope is, really. Slope is the change in your y values divided by the change in your x values. Or y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So this first point, this would be our first x and our first y. And then our second point here, B, would be our second x and our second y. And now that we've labeled, we just need to substitute. y2 is 2 minus y1 is 18 divided by x2 is 5 minus x1 is -3. And then we simplify. 2 minus 18 is -16 divided by 5 minus a -8. We can add the opposite, so that's just 8. And we can simplify that. -16 divided by 8 is -2. So our slope is -2. The length of a square is 15 centimeters. What is its area? Well, a square is a type of rectangle. And the formula for area of a rectangle is area equals the length times the width, or base times height. But what's special about a square is that its length and width are the same. So if we're told that the length is 15 centimeters, then that means the width is 15 centimeters as well. So we substitute 15 centimeters for the length and 15 centimeters for the width. So 15 times 15. 15 times 15, can multiply that out over here. 5 times 5 is 25. Write the 5, carry the 2. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. Get rid of that, put your 0 placeholder. 1 times 5 is 5, and 1 times 1 is 1. Then we add these up. 5 and 0 is 5. 7 plus 5 is 12. Write the 2, carry the 1. And 1 plus 1 is 2. So 15 times 15 is 225. And centimeters times centimeters is centimeters squared. So the area of a square with length 15 centimeters is 225 centimeters squared, which is answer choice D.